I don't know of any nation on earth in which there is a bigger difference between the people and those who govern them than that would exist in Iran. And that's a fact that needs to be made repeatedly. In no way is the clerics who run that country representative of the people of that country and of its history and contributions it's made to humanity. And it's a point I wish we would continue to make. Senator Marco Rubio, January of 2025. At which point in time, I say skadoosh.
From high atop the battlements of Castle Curmudgeon, where all the swinging youngsters are singing the immortal 1963 Beach Boys classic, Bum 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 Iran. Good evening, Mr. and Mrs. America, and all ships at sea, especially if your ship is in the Strait of Hormuz. Welcome to the Last Radius. We are just elated to have you with us tonight, but of course that goes without saying. Full disclosure right at the top, yes, I know I already did an Iran-specific field guide 6 or 7 weeks ago, but that was more of a 30,000-foot view of the last 1,000 years of assorted Persian and Iranian despotisms. But given the events of the last 48 hours, circumstances would seem to demand that we revisit that same topic once again. Where we normally open the aperture tonight, we are narrowing it just a little bit. We are focusing exclusively on the 47-year history of the Islamic Revolution and the Islamic Republic. Pick your term you prefer, I guess, and giving a detailed accounting of its collected misdeeds. Because when the day arrives that the United States is killing your leadership and decapitating your regime in the hopes of creating a power vacuum that gets filled by somebody else, anybody else, that didn't just happen by random accident. You had to earn that. But this will actually be the end of, will it be the end of the Islamic Revolution, or will it find a way to hang on and retrench itself and persist for another 47 years? Maybe another 47 years after that. It's impossible to say, obviously, but the answer, when we have it, will do much toward determining whether this military action was a wise or an unwise thing to have undertaken. But for our purposes here, we will treat this like an aspirational obituary. We will proceed in the assumption that this is, in fact, the end of the Islamic Republic of Iran, and we are composing the epitaph that will adorn its civilizational tombstone. And with those preambular pleasantries having been dispensed with, we now present for your kind consideration Curmudgeon's Field Guide to the Islamic Republic. Prologue: Revolutions Eat Their Parents. There are two Irans. There is the Iran of Hafez and Ferdowsi, of engineers and filmmakers, of women who filled universities long before it was fashionable to applaud such things, of a civilization older than most European capitals. And then there is the Islamic Republic, a state born in 1979 that grafted a revolutionary clerical ideology onto that civilization and declared itself its sole legitimate interpreter. Those two things are not identical. They have been forced to coexist for nearly half a century. The story we are about to tell is not the story of Persia, nor even properly the story of Iran. It is the story of a regime, how it came to power, how it consolidated control, how it financed itself, how it projected influence abroad, how it survived crises that would have felled less determined systems, and how it may yet survive this one. We begin with a misconception. The 1979 revolution was not born Islamist in character. It was born combustible. By the late 1970s, the Shah's Iran was modernizing at a breathtaking pace. Literacy was rising, women had suffrage and legal standing, urbanization was accelerating. Oil revenues were underwriting grand ambitions. It was not Sweden, nobody pretended it was, but it was a state tilting decisively toward secular modernization. And that tilt produced friction. Clerics resented marginalization. Leftists resented authoritarianism. Bazaar merchants resented economic dislocation. Students resented corruption. Nationalists resented dependence on Washington. They did not agree on very much, but they did agree on this. The Shah had to go. Revolutions are rarely ideological at birth. They are coalitional. They gather grievances first and sort out the doctrine later. What followed in 1979 was not the inevitable flowering of political Islam. It was the most disciplined faction within a broad revolt, outmaneuvering its temporary allies and reverse engineering a revolution into a theocratic state. And this matters, because when we evaluate the Islamic Republic, we are not evaluating Iran. We are evaluating the faction that captured it. 47 years is long enough to keep score, so let us keep it. Chapter 1, 1979 to 1984, the hijacking. Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini returned to Iran in February 1979 to a hero's welcome. He did not return alone. He returned as the symbolic nucleus of a movement far broader than clerical Islamism. Secular liberals believed he would return to Qom as sort of a moral guide. Marxists believed they could out-organize the clergy. Nationalists believed sovereignty would be restored without theological overhaul. They were all mistaken. Within months, the architecture of the new state began to crystallize. Revolutionary courts dispensing swift justice, political rivals sidelined or eliminated. A constitutional referendum establishing Velayat-e-Faqih, ruled by the Islamic jurists. The creation of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, the IRGC, parallel to the regular army. The U.S. Embassy hostage crisis in November 1979 proved catalytic. What began as a student seizure hardened into a 444-day spectacle that unified the country against a foreign adversary and marginalized moderates who urged restraint. Crises consolidate power. Foreign confrontation legitimizes internal purges. And then came the Iran-Iraq War in 1980. Saddam Hussein invaded, calculating that revolutionary chaos had weakened Iran. Instead, the invasion fortified the new regime. 8 years of brutal trench warfare fused nationalism with religious martyrdom. The IRGC expanded from a revolutionary militia into a permanent pillar of the state. War does for fragile regimes what oxygen does for a flame. By 1984, the Islamic Republic had accomplished three things: eliminated or neutralized secular revolutionary partners, institutionalized clerical supremacy in constitutional form, and embedded a parallel security apparatus loyal not to the nation, but to the revolution. The hijacking was now complete. Iran had not ceased to exist, but it now operated inside a theological frame enforced by men with guns. Chapter 2, 1985 to 89, War as Foundry. If the early years were about seizure, the mid-1980s were about forging permanence. The Iran-Iraq War dragged on with catastrophic human cost, hundreds of thousands dead, unarmed men sent on human wave attacks against trenches and machine gun nests. Basically, the First World War, except twice as horrifying and 10 times as futile. Cities bombarded, chemical weapons deployed, entire generations marked by martyrdom narratives. And within this crucible, the regime refined its governing logic. Sacrifice as virtue, resistance as identity, suspicion of the West as doctrine, revolutionary export as a mission. During this period, Iran cultivated relationships beyond its borders, most notably with Hezbollah in Lebanon, which had emerged amid the chaos of that country's civil war. Whether described as sponsorship, patronage, or alliance, the relationship became one of the defining features of Iran's regional strategy. The model was a clear one: project influence indirectly, empower non-state actors, maintain plausible deniability when convenient. At home, institutions hardened. The Guardian Council gained teeth. The IRGC deepened its economic footprint. The revolutionary state ceased to feel temporary. And then in 1988, Khomeini accepted a ceasefire with Iraq, an act which he likened to drinking poison. The war ended not in triumph, but exhaustion. A year later, Khomeini was dead. Regimes built around charismatic founders often fracture when it's time for succession. The Islamic Republic, regrettably, did not. Ali Khamenei assumed the position of supreme leader. The system endured. By 1989, the revolution had transitioned from upheaval to structure. What began as revolt had become governance. What began as coalition had become clerical hierarchy. What began as idealism had become statecraft. The question from here forward would not be whether the Islamic Republic could seize power. It had done that. The question would be whether it could modernize without surrendering control, and whether its ideological commitments abroad would one day exceed its capacity at home. And we will find out. Chapter 3, 1990 to 94, Reconstruction without repentance. The war ended in exhaustion. The ideology did not. The early 1990s were defined by Reconstruction. President Akbar Hashemi Rafsanjani pursued economic rehabilitation, infrastructure repair, limited market reforms, cautious reintegration into global energy markets. But Reconstruction was not reform in the Western sense. The constitutional architecture of clerical supremacy remained intact. The Guardian Council retained veto authority. The IRGC did not retreat to the barracks. It expanded into construction, telecommunications, energy, and finance. The revolution professionalized. Internationally, Iran's strategy matured rather than softened. Support for non-state actors in Lebanon continued. Allegations tied Iranian operatives or proxies to attacks abroad during this period, including bombings in Argentina in the early 1990s. Tehran denied direct responsibility. Western and Israeli intelligence services asserted otherwise. The pattern, denial, ambiguity, plausible distance, became familiar. The regime had discovered a durable formula: avoid direct conventional confrontation with major powers, cultivate asymmetric leverage, maintain enough opacity to prevent unified retaliation. Meanwhile, early nuclear research advanced quietly. Publicly framed as civilian energy development, privately viewed by outside observers as hedging toward weapon capability, the program entered what would become a decades-long cycle: opacity, exposure, negotiation, partial rollback, then resurgence. Reconstruction did not signal ideological retreat, it signaled patience. Chapter 4, 1995 to 99, Reform and the Guardrails. In 1997, Iranians elected Mohammad Khatami in a landslide. It was a remarkable moment. High turnout, youth engagement, women voting in large numbers, talk of a civil society, dialogue among civilizations, and even press freedoms. For a brief period, it appeared that the Islamic Republic might evolve from within. This is where the distinction between Iran and the Islamic Republic becomes unmistakable. Tens of millions of Iranians were not particularly interested in clerical governance. They were interested in normalcy, economic opportunity, cultural expression, less intrusive morality policing, engagement with the wider world. Newspapers flourished, universities buzzed, debate widened, and then the guardrails engaged. The judiciary shuttered reformist publications. The security services cracked down on student protests in 1999. The Guardian Council constrained legislation. Reform proved permissible only so long as it did not threaten the primacy of unelected clerical authority. The system allowed oxygen, but it did not allow surgery. Abroad, tensions persisted. U.S. sanctions intensified under the Iran and Libya Sanctions Act. Naval incidents occurred intermittently in the Persian Gulf, including harassment of foreign vessels. Even in the 1990s, Iran tested the boundaries of freedom of navigation in international waters, shadowing ships, conducting aggressive maneuvers, probing how far it could push without triggering escalation. These were not accidents, they were signals. The regime had internal reformist pressure and external confrontational pressure. It responded to both in the same way, incrementally, calculated, never conceding core authority. By the end of the decade, reformist optimism had dimmed, but not quite vanished. The population had revealed its preferences. The system had revealed its limits. Chapter 5, 2000 to 2004, Nuclear Shadows. In 2002, previously undisclosed nuclear facilities at Natanz and Iraq were revealed by opposition sources. What had long become suspected became concrete. Iran insisted the program was peaceful and within its rights under the Non-Proliferation Treaty. European governments initiated negotiations. The United States, particularly after September 11th and the invasion of Iraq, viewed the matter through a bit of a more severe lens. In 2002, President George W. Bush included Iran in the axis of evil. That phrase hardened positions in Tehran and Washington alike. From here forward, the nuclear file would become the regime's most valuable bargaining chip, and a pattern emerged. Advance capability, deny weaponization intent, enter negotiations under pressure, agree to partial constraints, secure sanctions relief or financial access, and preserve long-term leverage. Critics called it deception. Supporters called it strategic patience. Either way, it worked often enough to be repeated. Regionally, Iran's asymmetric posture deepened. Following the U.S. invasion of Iraq in 2003, Tehran gained extraordinary strategic opportunity. Saddam Hussein, its former invader, was gone. Political vacuums opened, militias proliferated, influence networks expanded. This was not accidental opportunism, it was structural advantage. At sea, harassment incidents continued episodically, small fast attack craft, close passes, occasional detentions of foreign sailors in disputed waters, each event individually minor, but collectively illustrative. A serious great power protects freedom of navigation as a stabilizing principle of global commerce. A revolutionary regime treats maritime friction as leverage. By 2004, the Islamic Republic stood at a paradoxical position. Economically constrained, militarily conventionally limited, asymmetrically empowered, nuclear ambiguous, domestically divided, but structurally stable. The revolution had not mellowed with age, but it had learned. Chapter 6, 2005-2009, Confrontation and the Street. In 2005, Mahmoud Ahmadinejad was elected president. If the late 1990s had flirted with reformist optimism, the mid-2000s returned to ideological confrontation. Ahmadinejad's rhetoric was abrasive, particularly toward Israel. His posture toward the West was defiant. The nuclear program accelerated. Centrifuges spun. International concern hardened into coordinated sanctions. The UN Security Council imposed successive rounds of penalties targeting banking, arms transfers, and nuclear-related entities. Economic pressure intensified. And yet the regime did not retreat. The nuclear file was no longer merely a scientific endeavor. It was a sovereignty narrative. To yield under pressure would signal weakness. To advance under sanction signaled resilience. And then came 2009. Ahmadinejad was declared the winner of a contested election. Millions of Iranians poured into the streets under the banner of what became known as the Green Movement. The images were unmistakable. Young, urban, connected, chanting for votes to be counted. Women, visible and social. Citizens not calling for foreign intervention, but for internal legitimacy. Here again, the distinction between Iran and the Islamic Republic sharpened. The protesters were not foreign agents. They were not fringe radicals. They were engineers, students, mothers, shopkeepers. They were the demographic reality of a country whose median age had collapsed downward since 1979. The system responded with force. Security services suppressed demonstrations. Leaders were placed under house arrest. Media space narrowed. The guardrails did not bend. And it is worth pausing here. For nearly 3 decades, the Islamic Republic had maintained a consistent operating principle. Permit controlled participation, deny structural change. By 2009, that principle was fully exposed. Abroad, meanwhile, maritime friction persisted. Harassment of commercial shipping in the Gulf, confrontations with U.S. naval vessels, and episodic detentions of foreign sailors reinforced a broader pattern. Calibrated brinkmanship designed to remind the world that key energy choke points sat within Iran's reach. No single incident constituted war. Collectively, though, they underscored leverage. By the end of this period, the regime was internationally isolated, economically pressured, domestically uneasy, and yet still intact. Chapter 7, 2010 to 14, Sanctions, Strategy, and the Wager. The sanctions tightened. Targeted measures escalated into sweeping financial restrictions. Iranian oil exports declined sharply. Access to the global banking system was constricted. Inflation surged. The currency faltered. Economic pain became visible. But economic pain alone does not guarantee political transformation. Authoritarian systems often distribute hardship unevenly, protecting core supporters while diffusing cost across the broader population. It was in this climate that Hassan Rouhani, a relative moderate within the Iranian system, was elected president in 2013. Behind the scenes, negotiations intensified. The wager, particularly in Washington and several European capitals, was straightforward. If sufficient economic incentive were provided, the regime would accept durable limits on its nuclear program in exchange for reintegration into global markets. It was not really an irrational wager. It was more of a foolishly optimistic one. This culminated in the 2015 Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, the JCPOA, the Obama nuclear deal. In exchange for verifiable limits on enrichment levels, centrifuge counts, and stockpiles, sanctions relief would follow. Supporters argued it blocked the path to a bomb. Critics argued that it deferred rather than dismantled it. Both sides understood one thing: the nuclear file was the regime's primary bargaining chip. And here we must observe the longer pattern. For decades, nuclear advancement had functioned not merely as a weapons hedge, but as financial leverage. Advanced capability, trigger pressure, negotiate partial rollback, secure relief, preserve optionality. Whether one views this as pragmatic statecraft or cyclical bad faith depends largely on one's expectations of revolutionary regimes. Meanwhile, Iran's regional footprint expanded. In Iraq, Shia militias deepened influence. In Syria, Tehran backed the Assad regime decisively. In Lebanon, Hezbollah remained entrenched. In Yemen, support flowed toward the Houthis. None of this was subtle. This was not the behavior of a state content with internal consolidation alone. It was the behavior of a regime convinced that exporting influence was essential to its survival. At sea, freedom of navigation tensions continued episodically. Harassment, vessel seizures, signaling maneuvers. Each small event, not enough to trigger a general war, large enough to remind global energy markets that the Strait of Hormuz remained a pressure point. By 2014, the Islamic Republic stood at an inflection point. Economically strained, diplomatically engaged, regionally assertive, nuclear constrained on paper, nuclear capable in knowledge. The wager had been placed. Whether it would hold was another matter entirely. Chapter 8, 2015 to 19, Money in, Pressure Back. The JCPOA took effect in 2015. Sanctions relief followed in the form of big pellets of U.S. taxpayer cash. Frozen assets were released. Oil exports rebounded. European firms explored re-entry into Iranian markets. The currency stabilized briefly. Supporters of the deal argued that integration would moderate behavior over time, that a regime with something to lose would behave differently than one permanently besieged. But moderation did not arrive in sweeping form. Regionally, Iran influence did not contract, rather it expanded. In Syria, Iranian forces and proxies played a decisive role in preserving Bashar al-Assad's government. In Iraq, Shia militias with varying degrees of Tehran alignment solidified political and military clout. In Lebanon, Hezbollah remained both political actor and armed force. In Yemen, support for the Houthis contributed to a grinding regional conflict. The nuclear file was partially constrained. The regional file was not. Critics seized on this asymmetry. They argued that sanctions relief had freed resources that strengthened Tehran's external posture while leaving the regime's internal character unchanged. In 2018, the United States withdrew from the JCPOA under the Trump administration and reimposed sanctions under a maximum pressure strategy. The logic was inverted. Economic strangulation would force broader concessions. Tehran responded by gradually breaching certain nuclear limits, incrementally increasing enrichment levels and stockpiles while insisting that the steps were reversible. The familiar rhythm resumed. Pressure, then escalation, then negotiation signals, then partial rollback, and then renewed pressure, rinse and repeat. Meanwhile, maritime incidents intensified periodically. Tankers were seized or detained in disputed waters. Commercial vessels were harassed. The Strait of Hormuz once again functioned as geopolitical punctuation. Freedom of navigation is not a symbolic principle. It is the circulatory system of global energy markets. Interference with it, even episodic interference, introduces volatility by design. These actions were rarely large enough to trigger sustained armed response, but they were rarely accidental. By 2019, the JCPOA framework was fraying. Sanctions were biting again. The nuclear clock was no longer comfortably distant. The wager had not failed entirely, but it had not transformed the regime either. Chapter 9, 2020 to 24, Brittleness and Force. In January 2020, a U.S. drone strike killed Qasem Soleimani, commander of the IRGC's Quds force. Soleimani had been central to Iran's regional projection strategy, a strategist of asymmetric influence across Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, and beyond. His death marked one of the most direct escalatory exchanges between Washington and Tehran in decades. Retaliatory strikes followed. Both sides stepped back from full war. The pattern held: calibrated confrontation without total rupture. And then came a different kind of challenge. In 2022, the death of Mahsa Amini in the custody of morality police sparked nationwide protests under the slogan, "Woman, Life, Freedom." The demonstrations were not limited to one class or to one city. They cut across provinces. Women removed headscarves publicly. Young men confronted security forces. Workers struck. Ethnic minorities mobilized. It was the most sustained domestic challenge to clerical authority in years. And once again, the distinction between Iran and the Islamic Republic was visible to anyone willing to see it. Tens of millions of Iranians are not particularly religious. Many women remember or have been told by their mothers and grandmothers that their rights once flowed from citizenship and not from clerical interpretation. The regime responded predictably. Arrests, uses of force, executions, information control. Brittle regimes often appear strongest at the moment of suppression. The durability question continues to linger underneath. Externally, regional friction continued. Proxy networks remained active. Maritime confrontations persisted. Missile and drone capabilities advanced. And now, in the past days, direct hostilities have escalated to a degree not seen in years. We will not pretend to know whether this is wise or unwise, stabilizing or destabilizing. Such judgments depend on outcomes that are not yet written. Nor will we declare that this is the end of the Islamic Republic. Regimes built on ideology and coercive capacity do not evaporate on cue. Some collapse suddenly, others absorb shocks far beyond what outside observers expect them to. But we can say this: the Islamic Republic today is not the revolutionary furnace of 1979. It is an aging system managing economic strain, demographic impatience, technological leakage, and geopolitical overextension. It is both hardened and brittle. Whether the events of this week mark an obituary or merely another chapter in survival remains unknowable at this remove, because we were not born yesterday. Epilogue: regime, nation, and the long horizon. 47 years is long enough to evaluate patterns. The Islamic Republic began as one faction within a broader revolt. It consolidated power through crisis. It institutionalized clerical supremacy. It cultivated asymmetric regional influence. It leveraged nuclear ambiguity for strategic and financial gain. It tested maritime norms without fully crossing into declared war. It suppressed internal reform when reform threatened structural authority. It has been designated by the United States as a state sponsor of terrorism since 1984. Faced sanctions for decades. It has outlasted multiple American administrations and multiple predictions of imminent collapse. And yet, here we are. Iran is not reducible to its ruling structure. It is a country of poets, coders, entrepreneurs, skeptics, devout believers, secularists, mothers who remember different laws, daughters who imagine different futures. When great powers evaluate regimes, they often confront unpleasant choices: support imperfect partners or risk more radical alternatives, apply pressure or risk proliferation, engage diplomatically or risk isolation. There are no clean hands in geopolitics. There are only gradients of risk. The Islamic Republic chose confrontation as identity. It chose clerical supremacy as constitutional design. It chose nuclear ambiguity as leverage. It chose maritime friction as signaling. It chose proxy networks as force multipliers. History keeps score. Whether this moment marks the closing of the account or merely another line item remains to be seen. We hope for the sake of the Iranian people that the future belongs more to Iran than to the republic that captured it. But hope is not analysis, and analysis is what we owe. And with that, we close the book on this week's field guide. We wish Godspeed to all of our service members for their courage and skill and intrepidity and dedication. We wish them a successful mission and a safe return. We honor the sacrifice of those who have fallen, and fervently do we pray that they gave the last full measure of devotion in service of a cause that proves to have changed the world for the better. And I now duly transmit you into the custody of my distinguished colleague, your illustrious co-host, the one and only, your friend and mine, Mr. Caucasian Sasquatch.
Tactical nuke incoming!
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Blast Radius tonight. We are obviously going to discuss a little bit about the whole debacle taking place in the Middle East. We're going to go over the Night of the Seven Kingdoms finale, probably the last two episodes, and I'm going to pitch an absolute hissy fit because I didn't get to see what I wanted to see. Then we're going to go into a possibly maybe alternate history, what would have happened if ... We do that occasionally. And beyond all of that, yeah, we're just going to have a really good time. That's the plan. Because I am celebrating surviving the dread plague of February. Because, dear God, I've been sick for 3 weeks. How you been doing, bud?
Better than you, it seems. But we're all glad that you've pulled through and that you're not going to wind up in the ground like Sir Arlen of Pennytree.
Right. Sir Arlen the Long. Sir Arlen the Stout.
Sir Arlen the Kielbasa Factory.
Right. That man is a walking sausage. Listen, seriously. Where do you want to start? Since we came in on the whole Iran situation, you want to just roll up on that and do it right?
Yeah, let's do that, and let's obviously see what the people in the chat have to say, and then we will if there's anything that tickles our boo-boo, then we will put it up on stage and talk about it.
Right. Well, we've got a lot of hate, of course, early on.
Of course.
Talking this, that, and the other, and some other things that I don't believe. We got Alexander in the chat. We got, well, that's unfortunate. That's not nice. That's not nice. Yeah. Okay.
Greenbird's here. That's all that matters.
This is one of my favorites that I've seen. This man gets a participation trophy. How do you think the Iranian-Islamic conflict will affect salmon prices in northern Maine? Correct me if I'm wrong. Isn't salmon a West Coast feature?
Can you buy a suicide vest for a fish?
I don't
asking
know.
for a friend.
Right. Well, that's what he dropped just a moment later, asking for a friend.
Oh, boom.
Giggle.
Look at that.
We got Mr. Beak. Welcome in, brother. Good to see you. Tony Toast. And the discussion about the third temple, I mean, patience, brother. Patience. We got D Chill. That's pretty cool.
There ain't gonna be a third temple, guys. I'm just gonna break it to you right now.
We got some Irish dude named Jason Brophy. Appreciate you coming through, brother. Absolutely. Starboy the Knight. That's good. I dig that one.
But you know what? That does go on the list of things that would be difficult to explain to the aliens on the day they land, and we walk them around and explain it, everything about human culture. How do we explain the fact that the most fought over piece of land is land that nobody in their right mind would ever want?
I'm assuming an alien race would have at least experienced religion at some point, and so whether they are still trapped in the endless wag the dog situation or not,
I do maintain that most of their questions would be about hockey.
Apparently, salmon is cheap on the East Coast.
How did you people get so bored that you decided to strap knives to your feet and go around doing whatever those people are doing?
Really, like, who was the first guy sitting around was like, I've got an idea. Listen, I know you think I'm nuts, but I'm going to put knives on my feet and skate across the river.
I know. And the answer is lost to the mists of time, but wouldn't it be great to know that guy's name so we could give him all the credit he deserves? You know,
And
he probably
see,
he probably died a very horrible death within 5 minutes of having the idea, but that's the way that we make advancements.
right? We
My
don't go
God.
on the thin ice from then on. And there might have been a few trial and error runs at that thin ice bit too. Come to think of it, seems we still
and
have
we
a problem.
and we
with that.
we still, I mean, far be it from me to extraneously introduce new topics, but we still haven't talked about freaking Alex Honnold and his ascent of Taipei 101.
Oh, I totally missed that. Do the thing. Tell me.
Well, I would like to know what the chat thinks about it, what the audience thinks about it, because it gave me kind of an icky feeling that it was. I mean, first of all, he's not that kind of a climber. He climbs natural terrain. He doesn't climb buildings. So I thought that was kind of weird, and I think it's kind of tawdry to be doing these things live on Netflix. And I think free soloing in general, I have always been in the camp that says, you know, nobody has the right to tell Alex that he shouldn't free solo, and it's not up to him to make other people understand why he does it. But I think those arguments tend to collapse pretty quickly when you're now past your 40th birthday and you have a wife and two small children. And my God, I just wish he would stop and especially not do any more live building climbs, because I
Why
think
build?
you only diminish your legacy by doing things like that, irrespective of how much money it brings you. Maybe that's just me.
But why buildings? That's the thing I've never understood about that. I mean, I
Because
know because it's there, but I don't get it.
I really very much doubt it was his idea, but they kind of invented a gimmick for the show that says, "Oh yeah, I've wanted to climb this building for so many years, ever since I first saw the drawings." But I think that's a bunch of horse shit. I think he was probably offered a whole bunch of money to climb a building just because it's so much easier to present something as made for television spectacle when it's a building instead of the side of a rock. Because they had dozens of cameras all over that building, every single place. The kind of stuff that you can't, and they've got a dude in a crane with a camera following him up the whole way. All kinds of shit that you absolutely cannot do if you're out in a natural setting. In terms of the
Jason
way that
Murphy has a good point. If that was your neighbor, he'd be dead. But if that was my neighbor, he'd at least be arrested. I mean, they arrested his
indeed.
ass for climbing the damn water tower. You know they'll arrest his ass for climbing that. No matter how drunk and jacked up on meth he is.
And the people who go and watch something like that in person, it's one of those mentalities I don't really understand. I guess it's the same as the NASCAR fan, really. Let's see how many people in the chat yell at me for saying that, because you might claim that you're going to it because you just like the art form or whatever, but let's be honest, you're going because there's a non-zero chance that you might see someone die a horrible, fiery, agonizing death.
Well,
I
was
refuse.
thinking,
Go ahead.
as far as people watching it, I mean, if you're doing a large building, chances are it's in an inner city range, and there's going to be a lot of people around anyway. If you see somebody climbing along in a building, you're going to look up and see whether or not they fall. And you know, at least a third of those assholes were going, "Do it, go ahead, do it." You know it.
Yeah, and obviously each time he goes past a window, there's a room full of idiots waving at him. Like, what do you want him to do? Wave back? Because, like, you couldn't just stand there and watch without waving? Like, what good does the wave do? How does that bring light into the world at this particular moment when this guy's free solo on the side of the building? Like, you want him to stop and wave to you and fall to his death? Is that what we're doing here?
That's right.
God's sake.
Smiley face pin. because I'd probably look really mad about halfway up that building. I'd be upset about it. I wouldn't do it in the first place. And it's not due to an lack of adventurous spirit. It's just, I mean, you have to do that type of stuff when you're building the damn building. Once you've done it, because it's part of your job, it's not nearly as interesting as it's not novel anymore. You know what I mean? You have to go up that summit 37 times a month, right?
It's hard to believe it's been almost 10 years since Free Solo, but I'm sure most of the people here have seen Free Solo. And I kind of hoped that he would stop free soloing after that whole thing, because how are you going to top that, dude? You're just, nobody in the next 500 years is going to top the thing that you just did. So don't try to top it. Just go marry your annoying little girlfriend and squirt a couple of babies into her and just chill, dude. Just do whatever you want to do. Just don't fucking free solo anymore, and especially not past your 40th birthday.
Well, doesn't it have a little bit of like the evil Knievel kind of flavor to it? Isn't this just another form of daremanship?
That's a comparison that I resist when it comes to Alex Honnold, because he so totally is not an adrenaline junkie and just doesn't have anything resembling that personality, which Evil Knievel very much did. I'm like, Evil Knievel would have fought literally anybody he ever met. Like that's how short of a fuse that guy had. Alex Honnold is the
like
most
it's wrong.
Alex Honnold is the chillest dude that ever lived. I mean, I doubt if anybody has ever heard him raise his voice. And I think he has a good answer that he gives when idiot interviewers ask him things like, "Oh, don't you know you're going to die, dude, if you fall? How can you do things that are such high risk?" And he stops them right there, and he introduces them to the difference between high risk and high consequence. And it's an important distinction to make, and I like the fact that he makes it, and he makes it effectively.
Can you
Because
grab
he
a
says,
quote on that?
I'm sorry?
Have you got a quote on that?
Not offhand, but
Can you
I,
paraphrase it?
you want me to find one? But the thing he says is, when I'm the actual risk of me falling isn't any different when I'm 2,000 feet off the ground or 5 feet off the ground. The thing that changes between the one and the other is not risk, it's consequence. I'm in a more high consequence situation at 2,000 feet because everybody understands what the consequence is going to be if I don't make the next handhold. But risk and consequence, not the same thing. And my God, nobody has to deal with stupider questions than Alex Honnold does. Like, I don't think he's ever had an interview where the person didn't say, "Don't you realize you're going to die if you fall, bro?" I don't know how he tolerates it, really.
Well, I mean, it's the same question that steel hangers and roofers have been dealing with their whole lives. I'm a big guy. I'm not the guy that you would generally expect to be a roofer. You know, that's usually the purview of small people, right? But
Yes, small Mexican people,
circumstances
to be
being as they
specific.
are, it usually involves the bigger people having taken a fall at some point or getting really close to it, and they stop doing that stupid stuff. Never happened to me. So I'm up there with a guy half my size running exactly the same stuff that they're running. And they all just keep looking at me and they keep telling me, it's like, it's inevitable. Eventually, you're just too big. Something's going to shift, something's going to move, and you're going to drop. So safety becomes not just a buzzword, but literal life breath. Every single step is a hook off. Every single step is another hook, right? 2 points of contact at all times, the whole nine. It's and when you're free soloing like that, when you're going up a freaking building on the outside, first of all, this is the outside of a building. You don't belong there, sir. Second of all, can you get that smudge in my window? It's been bugging me for like 6 fucking months. Goddamn bird flew into it.
And I guess it annoys me even a little bit more because the act of climbing the building is, I mean, in terms of technically, it's basically kindergarten shit. you're just climbing up the same thing after the same thing after the same thing. It's not remotely like what it is when you're planning an ascent of Half Dome or El Cap or whatever it is. But and that's kind of the other thing where I think there's more differentiation between a Honnold and an evil Knievel, because the other thing about Knievel was that he had absolutely no regard for his own life, and he did lots of things that wouldn't have been possible to rehearse. But Honnold is the exact opposite of that. When that dude is going to free solo a wall, he's been up there 10, 20, 100 times already with ropes, planning out every single handhold, every single foothold. He doesn't attempt any sort of a free solo until he's got literally every single step with all four limbs memorized and planned out and practiced over and over and over again, and that's why he's able to do those things with such security. But I still wish he would stop. So badly do I wish he would stop.
I just, like I said, I really don't see the point in climbing the outside of a building. If that's what you're doing, then that's what if people are willing to pay you for it, then fine. I don't understand it, but okay.
And I imagine I haven't looked to be sure, but I imagine it has not caused good feelings in the rock climbing community. That its greatest hero and greatest exponent should be doing, live on Netflix building climbs. I mean, I can pretty much guarantee that's been wildly unpopular in the climbing community. Just a wild guess.
So people go, they watch, he climbs. Does he come down the elevator? I mean, like,
yeah,
what do you do once you've done that?
He went all the way to the very tip top of the building, but then they left a harness up there for him. So he kind of rappelled down the first little part and then hopped on the elevator and
I mean, sure.
Yep.
I guess. I mean, okay.
Oh yeah, they showed it all on the special.
The Argonauts, welcome in. Good to see you, bud.
You queers in jail.
Yeah, not currently.
I'm not current. Yeah, I mean, I'm also not currently a queer, but
I mean, I've got an open mind. I mean, I'm the hormone monster. I mean,
but if I was going to go queer, it would be for this gentleman right here. God damn it!
I mean, look at this. Check this beard out.
How could look at
that? You don't understand.
And look at that goddamn antler helmet.
That thing is beautiful, dude. I love the job you did with me being the laughing storm. That is freaking great, dude. When I heard about the Night of the Seven Kingdoms was being done, and I was like, oh God, I can't wait to see, what's his name, Lionel? Oh my God, I cannot wait to see the Laughing Storm in person. Who do you cast as a Laughing Storm? I hear Deadpool's currently busy. I mean, this man has won combat with jokes, weaponized humor. He's one of my few heroes I have from Game of Thrones, and he's always absolutely on point with a quip every single time.
Oh, I know. He's a troll before trolls existed. He's got all the troll skills you could ever want, and there he is living as a medieval lord and knight. What a waste,
thing, bro. It's and the guy they got to play him, I couldn't have asked for better. The only thing I could request is a bit more hair, because that was kind of one of the things that was mentioned, is he was voluminous in almost every descriptor of the word, kind of pompous and completely full of himself. And they did it. They did the thing. It's great. Oh, I love it. I'm sorry.
Have we discussed the fight scene in detail? Did you get everything you wanted to get off your chest about that? About not seeing the fossil ways?
Oh my God. I
made him growl.
I just wanted to see the green apple just blow the fuck up all over homeboy, right? Just tear him down, bro, because he's never been allowed to actually strike him with an actual weapon. He's always been given a stupid freaking lucerne hammer. He was never really allowed to take a full stance against him. He was always positioned to fail because he had better armor, he was older, he was stronger, had more experience, the whole nine. And so when that youngin got a hold of some actual armor, it got real quick, bro.
I like that we got to see his green apple shield in the episode 6.
Well, I mean that, and this is
what
another
did he say? Better an unripe green apple than a red wormy one,
right? Rotten to the core. And
Yeah.
all of the apple humor
And
is
that-
great too.
Well, and that's like actually a really important thing in Westerosi history, because the family splits off into a cadet branch, and Raymond winds up being the founder of the Green Apple Fossilways, who grow into a major house in their own right.
Which is interesting. The most common green apple I'm familiar with is a Granny Smith, and about the
Me
only
too.
thing those things are good for is making cider. So it makes sense,
true.
especially if he's got the only access to them.
And the family seat is called Cider Hall.
All right, we have another participation trophy over here, and it is in reference. It's a callback. Let's see.
Oh, I love it.
I know all about
But,
hormones. They make me act like a horn moan. From Paula Nitz. Thank you for participating. That's great. And then
Yep.
Beak swings in, right? Mr. Beak shows up and says, "How do you make a hormone? Don't pay her."
Beautiful.
Y'all both get trophies. Thank you for playing.
Yeah. Chef Kiss, you're both legends.
Absolutely. So I guess we're going to have to go off into the oh no.
Oh, that one really tickled me.
It does. It's ticklish. Don't pay her.
Don't care. Oh man, that's good.
So where do we open on the next season? I have my theory, and you already know what it's gonna be. My theory. How do you open the next season? With the Fossaway fight, bro. You open up with that. You open up with the freaking Baylor getting his skull crashed in. You transition from that to homeboy, the dude with the broken leg, having his horse took out from under him, because I think Makar smashed him too.
And here you've introduced a difficulty for how you go about making the second season, because the first season not only was so well received, but it produced so many characters that people love and might not react very well if they never get to see again. So you're left with the conundrum of, do we just hew closely to the source material and nobody ever sees these people again, or do we write in maybe little opportunities for getting to see a fan favorite Fossaway or Baratheon character pop up every so often in the next season? What do you think?
Here's how I open the next season. When I open the next season, I open the next season with all of the fog of the battle and everything, and you see Dunk in the background and the Laughing Storm going nuts with the freaking white cloaks, right? And he's just having an absolute blast. And you cut to the fans, the particularly the whore, the redheaded chick, right? Cut back to Fossaway fight for a few seconds, playing, and then back to the horde, back to Baylor, then to Makar. And everywhere you do this, you put Dunk and his battle going on in the background, so that while it's not exactly clear what's happening, it is clear that he's getting his ass handed to him over there by a crowd, right?
Oh, I like what you're proposing.
You go back to the Fossaway fight, then to the hooker in the audience, back to the Fossaway fight, and back to Makar, and then Baylor gets smashed in the head. There's a little bit of shenanigans there. You can flash back to the Laughing Storm having laid waste to half of the King's Guard, right? And then flash back to,
It would be really cool if they shot it in such a way that you could create both presentations, because those would be outstanding bookends. Now that you've laid that out in my mind, I want to see it.
In the middle of all this nutso stuff, there's a transition. Instead of cutting to the hooker in the stands, it cuts to the hooker in the bed afterwards, right? And then backs up, and you come back through the fight again, and then backs up a little bit to her walking out and taking Sir Raymond and going, "Come, let's patch your wounds and stuff, and her screaming in the stands again, and then her in the bed with him after, and then actually doctoring his wounds and stuff, you know, and the fact that this is a victory for Raymond Fossaway more than anyone else on that field. Yes, Duncan gets to live. The Laughing Storm had a blast. Makar killed somebody, and some other shit happened. But Fossaway creates a brand new house that goes forth to dominate that entire segment of Westeros.
And he's so excited he marries a knocked up hooker.
Which is an interesting point, because this establishes the line of the Green Apple, and the first two sons probably have two separate fathers. But you do have to admit one thing: you can almost guarantee there is a damn fine specimen of a man on the other side of that one, because this is a king's tourney. Knights, everyone.
But I did really like the approach, the aesthetic approach they took with how they presented that fight, except that Dunk probably had an excessive number of wounds that he sustained that, you know, might not have been, maybe he could have 5 or 6 instead of 9 or 10. I'm just saying that would help my suspension of disbelief, but who knows, maybe that's just me. But I like the fact that they portrayed the combat as so unglamorous, because that's not what you expect from high fantasy productions that depict knighthood. We expect the combat to be much more elegant than it ever would have been, and much more civilized than it would have been. But it really, in a trial by combat, which granted existed mostly only in the Germanic and French schools of knighthood, but that's much closer to what the actual combat would have looked like. I think it would have wound up with a couple of dudes in the mud fucking punching each other in the face, because, you know, let's face it, most fights do end up like that. It's one of the unavoidable facets of the human condition.
True. And how gritty and realistic it is. I mean, Homeboy gets desorted like fairly quick in there. Like a couple of times he has to go back and get his blade. That's not good. That's not good form for a knight, bro. On top of that, he gets knocked out at least twice. You don't usually survive that.
Right. And it's probably not survivable unless it remains a one-on-one situation. Because if one of those other guys on the other team gets disengaged and has a chance to come up behind you and just, you know, mash you in your dome piece, then there's nothing you can do about that. And so that's obviously, it makes you, it leaves you with a longing for wanting to see all of the other individual fights that enabled our hero to have his combat one-on-one, which obviously was the only way he was going to come through it. And when he sliced Arian in his upper thigh, I thought that was femoral artery. I thought they were going to have him bleed out, but they didn't.
I can't remember. I think that interferes with his ability to reproduce later, and I'm not sure if it's the actual injury or it's just the unmanning that he experienced at Duncan's hands. I mean, he did beat him like a redheaded stepchild. I mean, once he got a hold to him. That's the thing about fighting a big man.
And correct me if
dance around him and poke him and shit, but when he gets his hands on you, damage takes place.
Correct me if I'm wrong here, but isn't he the one that ultimately dies from drinking wildfire, thinking it's going to turn him into a dragon?
Yes, I'm almost certain. Yes, but I think that is after he gets sent to the Free Cities, and I think either he starts the Golden Company or one of his generals, one of his followers starts the Golden Company. I can't remember how that pans out. It was a byproduct of the Blackfires. Or maybe he joins the Golden Company for a while, or the Second Sons for a while. I can't remember, but he doesn't really have a whole lot of say in the later Targaryen effects.
And then Baelor had the son whose armor he was wearing, and which, of course, that contributed to his wounds being fatal. But that son's got to die too, so that, because we know that Makar becomes king, so if Baelor has still got a son, then the son needs to die before the because wouldn't he then become the heir apparent? I know this stuff's all hard to keep track of.
No, not necessarily. If Makar's the brother
Yeah.
and Baelor is the other brother, Baelor would have been
I'm gonna have to pull up the Targaryen genealogy.
There's one with a lot of loops. Looks like it came straight out of Alabama. The motherfucker's a vine.
You ain't joshing.
I'm not. I'm dead serious. They had to print it as an overlay so that you could uncover some names. Talk about a family bush.
Family log.
But
Or
if I'm not
maybe
mistaken, if Makar, Baelor, and was it Acerys? Who's king at the time? What's his name?
Isn't it Eris the First? No,
Aerys first.
No, it's Daron the Good.
Oh, wait, whoa. Okay, so we're not exactly expecting a whole lot of rage and vitriol from the Targaryen house currently. Homeboy's just doing stuff. Right, gotcha. Okay. Well, that kind of explains a lot. That's why.
Yeah, God, this succession is so hard to make sense of. Because Makar's got 1, 2, 3, 4. He's 6 kids, of one of whom is our friend Little Aegon, of course, and another of whom is Maester Aemon, who we know from Game of Thrones, and then Arion, who we know from the show that just finished, and Daron, who we know from the same. So there's still a daughter we don't know. 2 daughters we don't know, I guess. So yeah, that explains why. And then his older sons all die before he does, because that's how little Aegon becomes King Aegon the Fifth. So that must be how that all works out.
Sorry, I'm tinkering with my stuff over here. I look like I'm filming with a potato. I mean, it looks fine in here, but when you look on YouTube, I swear to God, I'm a square block. And I don't know why.
You look human to me.
Yeah, no, it's perfectly clear in StreamYard, but when I look over at the okay, so that improved it a little bit. Okay. What up, Kev? Keep the marathon going, brother. Hey, he did a show the other day that absolutely flummoxed me. He was going over, what was it you called it? In LA, they've got something called the Grid Network or something like that. Apparently, the mayor's office is involved with major gang leaders across the city, and they use them for like information and whatnot. And the major gang leaders across the city get paid. I think he said $555,000 a year to maintain a intel network within the city as to where and how and when gang incidents take place, whether or not murders are gang related or not, and that kind of stuff. And I had a buddy of mine who was like a total fruit job, tinfoil hat conspiracy theorist who broke that whole thing down to me years ago, and I just didn't buy it. But he came in with actual documents and receipts. Marathon Kev over here, Marathon Kev TMC, the marathon continues. My brother, it was so interesting. I got sucked in for almost an hour until they went off on Resto's BS. What up, Darlene? Welcome in. Sorry, I just
Yeah, well, yeah, I've heard those rumors too. Those rumors have existed for a long time. I mean, well before the current mayor, and there's nothing about them that inclines me to believe they're untrue.
I mean, if I'm not mistaken, that type of trash goes back to Tammany Hall.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, you know, it goes back to Otto Hightower, for God's sake.
Eh.
Goes into our fictional past, but that's what political machines do. It's one of the things political machines do. They avail themselves of all channels of information that might produce something politically useful that helps to ensure survival when when crisis situations arise.
I get it, but at the same time, it kind of seems like if you just lock those bastards up, you might be able to kind of cut the problem off at the pass. Maybe, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know how I feel about that.
But we have running the law enforcement apparatus in probably most, if not all, of our big cities, people who utterly reject the any of the traditional models of criminal justice. And you can tell it implicitly just when you read the quotes they give. They talk about earning trust in the community and partnerships, and they never mention we need to get criminals off the streets and keep the citizenry safe, because that just is not any sort of a component of the law enforcement philosophy of the woke left in the third decade of the 21st century. And the results are as unavoidable as they are unsurprising, I would submit, because places become much safer where the people who run the law enforcement apparatus believe stupid things like that.
Yeah. Luckily, there are multiple layers to the law enforcement apparatus. Like, for instance, the sheriff's office typically not nearly as easy to politically sway than the municipality police.
Right. And that's something that's especially true in Los Angeles, because the LA County Sheriff has that, I mean, not just the person, but the office in general has always been really stalwart about not going down that whole woke leftist path of madness. And so as the LAPD goes farther and the sheriff's department doesn't, they look even more wildly dissimilar from one another. And I don't think that gulf is going to close anytime soon.
Well, the sort of the charter behind the sheriff's office is different from the charter behind most municipalities.
Sure.
You know? And I think that's a large restraining factor. People won't elect that type of person to sheriffs, whereas chiefs are generally appointed. Or is it the other way around?
That changes city to city. I don't think there's a standard yes or no answer to it. Some are elected, some are appointed. I know here in San Diego County, we have an election for sheriff, but I think that's the only type of badge carrying officer that we elect.
Right.
Some
places elect judges, and that's wild.
Yeah. And I think that's the same in LA County. And here in Southern California, our sheriff's departments are generally a little bit closer to resembling police departments than they might be in other parts of the country, because our sheriff's departments aren't only responsible for the unincorporated areas of the county, they also contract with all of the individual cities that don't have their own police department. And so in those cities, the sheriff's deputies are just your cops. So, and I know that's not the same in other large swaths of the country where there's a great deal of difference between sheriffs and police departments. But like I say, in LA, somehow the sheriff's department has managed to remain much more sane than the LAPD has, and however they're doing it, they should keep doing it, because we need more sane institutions and not fewer.
Yes, sir. So what do you predict? Okay, wait. Are we going to stick on the cops thing, or are we going to go back to the Night of the Seven Kingdoms? Because we've kind of bifurcated our conversation.
Yeah, I'm not sure which we should do. Want me to read out my little monologue about the Japanese fleet?
Okay, let's do that. We're in the last 30 minutes. We got it.
All right, here we go. The Ghost Hunt, Nagumo's evasive retreat. While the world remembers the explosions of the Arizona, the Japanese story of December 7th really begins at 12:15 p.m. as the last of the second wave planes wobbled back onto the decks of the Akagi and the Kaga. The atmosphere on the flagships wasn't just celebratory, it was paranoid. Admiral Nagumo was haunted by a ghost fleet. He knew the USS Enterprise and Lexington were out there somewhere, and for all he knew, they were already launching a counterstrike. This fear of the unknown is what stopped a third wave from hitting the fuel farms. Instead, Nagumo chose survival. He ordered the fleet to a heading of 330 degrees at a blistering 26 knots, maintaining total radio silence. They weren't just returning to Japan, they were actively zigzagging through the North Pacific's winter gales to shake any possible American pursuit. By December 16th, the Japanese grew bold enough to split their strength. They detached Carrier Division 2, the Soryu and Hiryu, to salvage a failing invasion at Wake Island. The Marines there had already humiliated the Japanese Navy once, but when the carriers arrived, the math changed instantly. On December 21st, at exactly 8:50 a.m., 29 Val dive bombers and 18 Zeros from the Soryu and Hiryu appeared over Wake. For the defenders, this was the oh no moment. These weren't the land-based bombers they had been fighting. These were the elite carrier crews from Pearl Harbor. A second strike hit at 12:20 p.m., systematically dismantling the island's anti-aircraft batteries. By the time the final assault began on December 23rd, the Kido Butai's planes had effectively blinded the island. Wake surrendered that morning, but the victory was hollow. The Japanese fleet returned to Kure by the end of December, safe but frustrated. They had conquered the Central Pacific, yet they still hadn't seen a single American carrier. That failure to clear the fog of war in December 1941 set a psychological trap for the Japanese that would eventually spring shut 6 months later at Midway. The end.
All right. So here's my hypothetical. And I've got a little clip. If I can find it, it might take me a minute to actually get it. What was the timestamp I texted you? Do you remember? 24:26, right?
Yes, absolutely.
All right. So it all derives from a question that popped in my head when I was watching The Fat Electrician, and he makes this statement.
Ensign, which is something that you don't do for a training exercise, and he realizes that this is for real. Later that day at dusk, they send Dusty and the rest of the planes in the USS Enterprise up on another mission. They are going to try to track down the Japanese fleet and return the favor for what they just did at Pearl Harbor. Unfortunately, they were given a bad heading and weren't able to locate the Japanese fleet. Next morning.
Okay, so this is within an hour or two, 3 hours tops of the actual event taking place, right? The Japanese fleet has turned tail and run. They are running like a scalded dog, zigzagging to avoid any of our submarines or any of our aircraft carriers and everything. And they send out this sortie with one of the most badass dive bombers to have ever fielded a plane in battle ever to go find them. Here's my hypothetical.
Go ahead.
What happens if Dusty finds them, right? This carrier group flies out, locates the fleet, and then flies. At least one of them flies back, and the rest radio back. Position is noted, the direction is noted, the speed is noted. Do we have enough in the Pacific to make a response before they split?
It depends on what constitutes a response. I mean, an effective response, we probably weren't in a position to fight a decisive battle. But
against that fleet, that one fleet, which I know it was two carriers, but I don't know, man.
I mean, if you can bring Lexington and Enterprise both to bear with the element of surprise, then I'd be willing to say maybe yes.
Okay, so there is a snowball's chance in hell, 1 in a million, that an effective raid could have been run on that fleet before it makes it into safe waters.
Yeah, I don't see any reason why it's impossible.
Okay. What would be projected damage? I mean, obviously they'd aim for carriers and battleships, but beyond that, you're talking what? Call it 4 sorties, 8 sorties a day. You're talking at least, I don't know, 300 freaking 500-pound bombs being dropped on that fleet.
Yeah, and realistically, at that point in the war, you're not going to probably get a bomber anywhere close to one of their carriers. So you would have to content yourself with maybe taking a couple of destroyers or light cruisers, maybe damage over sinking. You know, you're not going to sink anything much bigger than a destroyer, I wouldn't think, in that scenario. But you know,
Right.
there's nothing wrong with taking out a couple of destroyers, maybe damaging a light cruiser. There's a worse day's works you could possibly have.
Okay. So here's my next
But
question.
but I just want to mention this because it's boring a hole in my brain. Because this is all down to a coin flip question that Halsey had to make on the fateful day, because all he had was a distance and a line of bearing. So we know how far away they were. We know what line they were on, but we don't know if they're north or south. They were north in the actual event, obviously, but Halsey said, fuck it, flip the coin, let's try south. And that's why they missed him. And if he had just chosen the other way, then we would know the answer to all these questions today.
Exactly. But here's my my next question. Does that contact result in them not splitting their fleet? Wake Island doesn't fall, then where are we at?
Now that's a fascinating question, isn't it?
That was the question that popped in my head the second he said something about sending that sortie out and finding nothing. I went, wait a second. If that sortie finds the fleet, then both Intrepid and Enterprise turn towards that direction. We've got them by what, 6 knots, 10 knots? We will catch them if we want to. It just might be closer to Japan than we're happy with. But do they break off a carrier for Wake Island if they are actively being pursued by 2 small carrier groups?
So what we're basically talking about here is the engagement that wound up being midway would have taken place 5.5, 6 months earlier. If you want to get down to brass tacks of the scenario we're talking about. And one has to say the Japanese would be more well equipped to win that battle than they were equipped 6 months later, after we had already, inflicted a little bit of damage on them. I think we probably don't win that battle if it happened 6 months sooner.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing, because they've also thinned out a lot of their manpower and material and skill across the islands in the Pacific, taking them 6 months later. Right. So
because
instead
each
of
time you take a thing, you have to garrison the motherfucker.
So instead of countering the piecemeal fleets we were encountering through the Turkey Chute and Midway and all of that, you would be encountering a full 2 carrier group, and we don't got that. Like, our 2 carriers are like battleships.
Yep.
They're like cruisers. They're like submarines. They're like everything. The only
our manufacturers are good, but we can't make an Essex class quite that quickly.
Also, the only thing they actually have a full complement of are pilots, airplanes, and bombs. That's the only good those carrier groups are at this point, because they don't have the destroyers, they don't have the cruisers, they don't have the protection that you would have in a usual carrier group, because all that shit got trashed out at Pearl Harbor.
And we don't have the next generation of airplanes that are coming off the assembly line in the next 5 to 6 months, but aren't there yet.
Yeah, they're still running Corsairs, right?
No, they don't even have Corsairs yet. They're running P-40s, Warhawks.
Ooh. Yeah, no, them Zeros would have shredded them guys.
Yeah. P-40s against Zeros is never an engagement that turned out well for our side.
Not unless it was like 5-3.
Yeah. And then you do have a few isolated instances like that during the Flying Tigers period, but yeah, in a head-to-head, the guy in the P-40 is never winning.
Yeah, one-on-one, that's pretty much a lost cause. I have done that same battle in simulators multiple times, and the P-40 just don't got it, man. They can't climb, they can't turn, they can't rotate. The Zero, and this is something that the Japanese pilots took huge advantage of. Because of the way their engines functioned, they were capable of using a brake to rotate the airplane around the engine instead of the engine turning. and that's why sometimes in the old footage you'll see a Zero flying along and that sucker will just like that quick fast enough to knock a pilot out. And so the pilots learned to use that in a way that wouldn't knock them out, but allowed them to vector in ways that other planes just could not do. And so they'd be like,
the Zero is the absolute best fighter plane in the world until you take a hit.
well, I mean, it's pretty much a flying fuel container.
You want to talk about an all or nothing approach? All performance, no armament. Therein lies the Zero.
They were using like 30 millimeters, weren't they?
I think so, yeah.
Like 30 rounds, not 30 millimeters, not one of these, but one of these. They basically took a Vickers and tried to put it on a freaking plane. Which, hey, I mean, ultimately that did work. I had somebody ask me yesterday. They said, she understand this woman is European. And she's like, why does America care about things that happen outside of America? And I was like, we have these things called missiles, and it means that we get to care. And a little while later, she brought it up again. And I was like, have you ever heard of a C-130? See, it's like the missile, but it has people in it. Later, she was talking about desert warfare. And I was like, so we got these things called Apache choppers. They blow your mind.
You know what still blows me away that I was talking about with my dad earlier today? I can't say this definitively, but my gut feeling is that these current operations against Iran, probably our biggest aerial assault since the opening hours of the Iraq War 23 years ago. But let's just assume that's correct right off the top. But the fact that some of the planes flying some of those attack profiles, they're not taking off from any place close to the place they're attacking. They're taking off from the continental United States, especially the B-2s. They're all taken off from Missouri. And it still seems like future science fiction to say that an American plane can take off from Missouri, hit a target literally anywhere on the face of the earth, and land back in Missouri without refueling. It seems like it should be science fiction.
Yeah. I didn't get that far in trolling her about it because it hurt her feelings and she kind of got upset about the whole thing. And the other guys on the panel asked me to stop because she was like, it's just none of your business. And I was like, we've got this thing called the B-2. It's going to blow your mind, bro. This reads like space cadet bullshit. Check it out.
I know. And we've had that capability for what, over 30 years now? And it still seems like future science fiction. And I am here for it. There ain't nobody else that can do that.
Paula Nets says, I might make a video eventually. There are some crazies that concern me from doing videos. Film something you love. Film yourself doing something that you love. And it will come through and people will watch it. If you try to fake that, it won't work.
I hope she's not talking about present company when she says crazies.
I mean, I'd accept it. What's up, Rav? Welcome in, bud. I'd accept it. I'm not normal.
It wouldn't be the worst criticism we ever got.
That's true. That's very true. We've had some quite vociferous people in the chat before. All right, Night of the Seven Kingdoms. We're going to do the whole thing hardcore, straight in. Like, I got to know. Because if Wake Island doesn't fall, that changes the entire premise of World War II. If we keep Wake Island and they don't disseminate the fleet across the Pacific, it's no longer a battle of parts of fleets fighting other parts of fleets and becomes entire fleet battles that we don't have. So what? Wake Island falls 2 months later when they're able to resupply and come back? Do we reinforce Wake Island from carriers and the couple of cruisers we got left?
Just as importantly, do we wind up losing Lexington and Hornet? As we did in the actual event.
Yeah, no, we don't lose Hornet and we don't lose Lexington because they're not doing the thing that they're doing. Instead, they're consolidating their force to project into the Pacific. So if we delay all of that by even a month and a half, 2 months,
Oh yeah,
they're
because
completely out of position for the rest of it.
if there's a timeline where we don't suffer those 2 losses, and we have the Essex class about ready to start rolling off the line any month now, I mean that you're looking at a war timeline that is getting compressed and
Well, that's an
truncated
interesting
in
thought.
the extreme.
So, okay, hypothetically, Essex rolls off a few months sooner because that changes the dynamics of how the war material is laid out. If we actually have the Japanese on the run, we're going to produce a carrier for the Pacific as soon as possible. That carrier becomes the primary platform off of which the U.S. Air Force operates. And the 2 other carriers that are currently in the Pacific basically become tender ships to maintain the Essex class. And what, 2 months later, another one rolls out?
And
Oh
I
my
know I say
God.
it, I know I say this all the time, and it's because I think it is one of the legitimately greatest industrial achievements in world history. The fact that we built and deployed, designed, built, and deployed 24 Essex class carriers between the spring of 42 and the end of the war in the middle of 45. I mean, what the fuck kind of a country do you have to be capable of industry like that? I'll answer the question for you. The fucking United States of America, that's who.
Right? Because by the time the war ends, we're supplying allies with what we refer to as obsolete material, but they consider cutting fucking edge.
And when our enemies war gamed how this thing was going to go before they started it, they had what they thought were reasonable prognostications about the level of domestic industrial output that we were capable of, and we completely obliterated all of those estimates, just completely out of the water. Because yeah, go ahead, go to war with the United States. You're not only going to war with the American fighting man, you are also going to war with the American steelworker. So best of luck to you.
At the time, Detroit, bro, they got a phone call one night, like Pearl Harbor just got hit, and some dude in the factory leaned back and went, okay, and pushed a button, and now they're making tanks instead of Packards.
I know, exactly. And you want to talk again about another just completely absurdly auspicious industrial achievement, how quickly we converted all of those car factories into factories for the exact thing, whether it was ammo belts or shell casings or whatever the hell we needed that factory to build. Oftentimes that work was done in days, weeks at the most. And not only that, but training all the workers to do a different job because we're making a different thing now. But God, that all got done so incredibly efficiently and effectively. And we just made our enemies look like fools because we were able to adapt so well, not only to the fighting side of it, but also the domestic war production side of it. And those bastards really never knew what hit them.
Would you be interested in a War Thunder sponsor?
I could do a good War Thunder spot. God damn it!
Have you ever played War Thunder at all?
No, I've only seen other people play it.
Okay, so here's the best part about War Thunder. Anything on Earth that you can think of that is associated with military combat between the dawn of the industrial age to almost modern times, you can eventually get it. Now you can go pay for it if you want to, or you can play enough to go get it, right?
Right.
I love these types of games until like it gets weird whenever they don't use good controls. If I can't put in like a 9-vector joystick on it and actually fly the airplane, I'm not interested, although I might play with the tanks.
So it's like a game and not a cell phone game.
Well, that's the thing is like it used to be a straight up like controller style, multi-axis, all of that. And then it like ported to phones, and now all of the controls are more like icon driven and whatnot. Or
Okay.
Anyway,
because it seems like when I see it advertised, it's always as a phone game. But what do I know?
Exactly.
Is it time for me to do the thing? Right. Ladies and gentlemen, thanks ever so much for joining us here on the Blast Radius tonight. I hope you enjoyed my super long field guide to the Islamic Republic. Hope you found it as edifying as I found researching it, but I don't need to ask because I know you did. We hope you have a great rest of your evening and a fantastic tomorrow and an edifying day after that, and just a really magnificent, uplifting remainder of your week. And then we will see you back here next Sunday, 8 Eastern, 5 Pacific. As we always do, we will always talk about very high-minded things because, let's face it, we are high-minded gentlemen. We will see you next time. Do not comply. Get off my lawn.
This one's for you, buddy. Nice.